Welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're going way back, exploring the history of interior design.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we'll see how people have been shaping their spaces over, well, like millennia.
Sounds ambitious.
It is. But we've got excerpts from a great design history book and a ton of visuals. So yeah, we're talking everything from prehistoric huts to those incredible ancient temples, ready to uncover how design reflects not just changing styles, but also cultural values, even power dynamics.
I'm ready. Let's dive in.
Okay, so the thing is, the history of interior design, it's really a history of humanity itself.
I like that.
It's all about how we relate to our surroundings, how we try to create spaces that meet our needs, like both practical and aspirational.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So and it makes you wonder, right? What were those early humans thinking when they built their first shelters?
Yeah, was it just about survival?
Or was there a spark of something more, a desire for something, well, aesthetic? Even in those early dwellings, you find evidence of human ingenuity and a desire to make a space feel like home.
Oh, absolutely. The book mentions these 400,000-year-old hut forms found in Terra Amata, France.
Wow, that's old.
I know, right? They were made from tree branches, incredibly basic, but still a deliberate act of shaping the environment.
It's mind-blowing to think back that far.
It is.
To understand these early designs better, the book suggests looking at societies that kept those traditions for much longer.
Ah, that's smart.
Like nomadic groups.
Exactly. Like Native American tribes who used portable structures like tipis.
Oh, yeah, tipis.
The circular shape, it wasn't just practical for moving around, it also created this sense of community.
Everyone gathered around a central hearth.
Yeah. That social aspect of design, it's something we'll see again and again.
Interesting. So it's not just about the structure itself, but also how people interacted within those spaces.
Right.
But as society settled down, things changed, right?
Yeah.
We start to see rectangular dwellings.
You got it. The book mentions the Ephraim Dawi ceremonial chief's house as an example.
Oh.
It's all about the materials. When people started using things like wooden poles, well, they naturally lead to straight lines.
Makes sense.
It's like the materials were dictating the design.
Interesting.
And it wasn't just practical. The rectangle, it began to symbolize permanence, stability, a shift from nomadic life to settled agriculture.
So even a simple shape like a rectangle can carry so much weight.
Absolutely.
And as building techniques improved, those structures get even more complex, like those round, domed houses in Apulia, Italy. It's amazing how they built those without modern technology.
They used a technique called corbelling.
Corbelling.
Basically stacking stones in gradually diminishing circles.
Like a 3D puzzle.
Exactly. Figuring out how to distribute weight and create a stable structure.
Even today, that's impressive.
Definitely.
Speaking of impressive, we can't forget those incredible structures built by ancient civilizations.
The pyramids, the temples.
It's incredible, all that ambition. And then the discovery of radiocarbon dating changed our understanding of sites like Stonehenge.
Oh, yeah. It's like suddenly getting a much clearer view of the past.
And those grand structures weren't just about showing off power, right? They were also designed to create a sense of awe and wonder.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Take the Mayan temples, for example. Their interiors were often decorated with murals.
Murals.
Yeah, depicting stories from their mythology. So it creates this immersive, almost theatrical experience.
Like ancient propaganda, but beautiful.
Exactly. It makes you wonder what it felt like to walk through those spaces, surrounded by all that symbolism and artistry.
I wonder, did they have patios too?
They did. Patios, porticos, relief decorations. The Mayans had a real sense of aesthetics.
It sounds amazing.
And even though they had limitations in their building techniques, they hadn't mastered the arch, for example, they still created complex spaces using methods like stone corbelling.
It's amazing what they accomplished with the tools and materials they had.
I know, right?
It highlights how design is often driven by problem solving, finding creative ways to overcome those limitations. The book also mentions the Chimo Kingdom in South America. Their design was all about straight lines and grids.
Oh, completely different from the Mayans.
Yeah.
The Chimu, they were all about order and precision.
Okay.
Their palaces, laid out in these strict grids, everything perfectly aligned.
So you'd walk through those spaces and feel this sense of structure and control.
Absolutely. Totally different from the, winding passages and hidden chambers you find in Mayan temples.
Wow, like two totally different philosophies of space.
Right.
Before we move on to ancient Greece and Rome, there's this civilization called the Minoans.
The Minoans.
Yeah, the book says they were way ahead of their time in interior design.
Oh, interesting.
The Minoans, based on the island of Crete, had this vibrant and surprisingly informal style.
Huh.
We get glimpses of it through the frescoes found in their palaces, showcasing their love of nature, color, and these playful motifs.
Wow, so they were doing something completely different.
It's almost like a preview of Art Nouveau centuries before it actually appeared.
That's wild.
It shows that those ancient civilizations weren't stuck in one style. There was experimentation and evolution even back then.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, I'm really excited to get to ancient Greece and Rome.
The columns, the temples.
It just screams grandeur, doesn't it?
It does. Get ready for a deep dive into the classical orders, because the Greeks, well, they wrote the book on column design.
Okay.
Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, each with its own proportions and ornamentation.
I see.
And those columns, they weren't just for show. They were load-bearing structures, allowing for those grand open spaces we associate with Greek architecture.
Form and function working together.
Exactly.
But what about everyday Greek homes? Was it all marble statues and elaborate columns?
Not quite.
Yeah.
Typical Greek homes were much simpler, more focused on practicality.
Okay.
White painted walls, floors of tamped earth or tile. But they did have this refined sense of furniture design.
Oh.
The klizmos chair, it was everywhere in Greek homes, a recurring motif in their art.
Interesting how even their furniture reflects those values.
Mm-hmm.
Simplicity, elegance, and a focus on craftsmanship.
Yeah.
Speaking of grandeur, though, the Romans took things to a whole new level, right?
They were masters of engineering and construction.
Weren't they the ones who mastered concrete, letting them build those huge structures?
Yes, exactly. Think of the Roman baths more like palaces of leisure than just places to bathe.
I was just thinking, those grand bank lobbies we see today, it's like they were inspired by those Roman baths, like a direct line from ancient Rome to modern finance.
I see what you mean.
But what about the average Roman citizen? Did they live like emperors?
Well, Roman houses, while not as extravagant as the baths, still show that love of order and symmetry,
I see.
often centered around a courtyard.
A courtyard.
Yeah, again, as a social hub for the family.
Like the ancient version of an open-plan living room.
Yeah, where everyone gathered to eat, relax, entertain guests.
I love that comparison. It shows how some design concepts just transcend time. And those houses in Pompeii, preserved by the volcano, give us a peek into their everyday lives.
Oh, Pompeii's amazing.
They weren't just functional spaces. They were decorated with frescoes, mosaics, even trompe-l'oeil techniques to create illusions of space.
Right, Pompeii is like a treasure trove for anyone interested in Roman design.
A chance to see how they lived, how they decorated.
Exactly.
It reminds you that history isn't just dates and battles. It's about how people lived, what they valued, how they expressed themselves through design.
I agree.
And speaking of changing times, our next stop takes us to the Middle Ages, a period shaped by new religious and cultural influences.
A whole new era of design.
Exactly.
With the Roman Empire fading, you see a shift in design.
Makes sense. A time of upheaval often means big changes in how people see the world.
And how they shape their spaces, yeah.
So what did these new styles emphasize?
Well, early Christian churches, they drew inspiration from the Roman basilica.
The basilica.
Yeah, a rectangular public building, but they adapted it for religious purposes. They needed big open spaces for all those people, and the basilica provided a template.
So they repurposed existing forms.
Exactly. Smart, right.
And then there's the Byzantine Empire with those incredible domes like the Hagia Sophia.
Hagia Sophia is, well, a masterpiece.
Those mosaics, that huge dome.
It's almost overwhelming.
It is.
That dome, seemingly floating on light thanks to the pendentives, triangular supports. They transition from the round dome to the square base.
Wow, that's clever.
An engineering marvel, really.
Yeah.
And the inside, decorated with colorful mosaics showing biblical scenes.
All designed to evoke a sense of, the divine.
Yeah, like you're stepping into another world.
A world of spirituality and grandeur.
Exactly.
But then you have the Romanesque churches, much darker, heavier.
They do have a certain, heaviness.
Almost somber. Is that like a reflection of the times?
Romanesque architecture, thick walls, round arches, not a lot of natural light.
Makes sense.
This was a period of a lot of instability and conflict in Europe, and that's reflected in their architecture. The focus was on strength, defense, physical and spiritual.
Design as a barometer of the social and political climate.
Exactly.
We also see monastic communities emerging around this time with their own approach to design.
Monasteries, they were like self-contained worlds, focused on simplicity and being functional.
Practicality.
They had to be self-sufficient, providing everything the monks needed to live, work, pray.
The book mentions the monastery of S. Martin du Canigou in the Pyrenees.
A great example of that practical yet beautiful design.
So not luxurious, but purpose-built.
Definitely.
Speaking of purpose-built, there's medieval castles with their great halls.
The Great Hall, that was the heart of the castle, where everything happened.
Everything.
Dining, meetings, entertaining, even sleeping sometimes.
Wow.
Imagine this big, drafty hall, massive fireplace, tapestries on the walls for insulation,
Trying to keep warm.
long tables for everyone to gather for meals, a communal space, but it also reinforced social hierarchy.
I can almost picture it.
And hear the crackling fire, right?
Makes you appreciate modern heating, though.
And insulation, for sure.
What about lighting back then? That must have been a whole other thing.
Imagine a world lit by just candles and oil lamps,
Wow.
full of shadows, a different kind of atmosphere.
We take artificial light for granted.
We do. It changed everything.
Let's shift gears a bit, move away from Europe. What about the Islamic world?
The spread of Islam led to this amazing flourishing of art, architecture, design.
From Spain to India.
Islamic design, it emphasizes geometry, intricate patterns, calligraphy.
It all has a spiritual aspect.
Definitely a connection to the divine.
The book talks about the Mosque of Ibn Tulun in Cairo.
A great example.
What makes it so special?
Well, mosques often have this central courtyard surrounded by arcades, a prayer hall facing Mecca, and the mihrab,
The mihrab.
the niche that shows the direction of prayer.
I see.
Mosque of Ibn Tulun has all that, but also this beautiful simplicity.
Okay.
Plain brick, pointed arches, stucco carvings, all creating this sense of serenity.
It sounds lovely.
It is.
The book mentions Islamic art avoids realistic depictions of people or animals.
It's a key aspect.
How did that affect their interiors?
The focus shift to abstract patterns, geometric motifs, calligraphy, expressing the beauty of creation.
I see.
Imagine walking into a space full of arabesques, the patterns repeating, creating harmony.
A geometric symphony.
Exactly. And we can't forget Islamic carpets.
They're practically iconic.
They were essential, providing warmth, comfort, visual beauty.
More than just functional.
Works of art, really. Think of the colors in a Bokhara rug transforming a space.
Textiles can really elevate a room.
They can.
Add warmth, texture.
For sure.
Our journey continues, though. What other design traditions are out there?
Let's go east, explore East Asia, from the grandeur of Angkor Wat to the minimalism of Japan.
I'm especially curious about Japan.
What about it?
I've always loved that aesthetic, the simplicity, harmony.
Japanese design, it's all about tranquility, connection to nature.
I see.
Natural materials like wood, paper, spaces designed for energy flow.
Makes sense.
Sliding shoji screens, tatami mats, and the tokonoma,
Tokonoma.
a special alcove for displaying art. A stroll, flowers, a treasured object.
Like a mini shrine to beauty.
Yeah, exactly. Creating a space for contemplation.
Before we move on to the Renaissance, tell me more about Angkor Wat.
Angkor Wat is this huge complex of temples, pavilions, courtyards built on a grand scale.
Impressive.
It shows the skill of the Khmer Empire. Imagine walking through those carved gateways, surrounded by those towering structures, bas-reliefs showing Hindu mythology.
Like stepping into a different world.
It is a world of ancient myths and stories.
And our journey through design continues. Next stop, the Renaissance, a time of rebirth, rediscovery that transformed Europe's design landscape.
Whole new chapter.
The Renaissance, a period of intellectual and artistic explosion.
It really was. It's like Europe woke up from a long sleep and rediscovered the beauty of classical antiquity.
And they ran with it.
They did.
Yeah.
Architects, artists, they all looked back to ancient Greece and Rome for inspiration.
Giving those classical ideas a fresh spin. The book highlights Brunelleschi, a Florentine architect who was key to this revival.
Brunelleschi. Oh, he was a master.
What were some of his, biggest contributions?
He brought back Roman arches, Corinthian columns, those balanced proportions.
Those proportions are what make Renaissance buildings so visually appealing?
Yes. His churches, like S. Lorenzo and S. Spirito in Florence, they're prime examples.
It's like he wrote love letters to ancient Rome, but in building form.
I love that. And then you have mannerism.
Mannerism.
It came later in the Renaissance.
Okay.
It's like the artists were getting a little, bored with the strict rules of classical design.
They wanted to shake things up.
Exactly. They played with elongated forms, distorted perspectives, unexpected combinations.
So they pushed the boundaries of what was considered acceptable.
They did. It's a style that surprises you, makes you see things in a new way.
Kind of like the punk rock of the Renaissance.
Ah, I like that.
We can't forget the Baroque period, though.
All about drama and opulence. Think of those interiors, swirling patterns, rich colors, dramatic lighting.
Well, overwhelming the senses.
Exactly. Designed to inspire awe.
Then there's Rococo, which seems like a lighter, more delicate version of Baroque.
Rococo emerged in the 18th century like a reaction to the heaviness of Baroque.
Okay.
It's all about a light, airy feel, pastel colors, delicate curves, playful ornaments.
Very different.
Think of those charming French salons, gilded mirrors, silk-covered furniture.
That sounds lovely.
Whimsical paintings of cherubs and lovers.
It's a style that celebrates elegance, intimacy, conversation.
Exactly.
Like the difference between a grand opera and a delicate ballet.
Perfect analogy.
As we move into the 18th and 19th centuries, we see a shift away from those grand European styles.
Interesting, right.
What's driving that change?
It's the rise of new global powers, like England, and the beginnings to the United States.
Each wanting their own identity.
Exactly. Each developing its own style, reflecting its own values.
So we're moving away from a Eurocentric view of design.
And towards something more diverse.
What styles emerged during this time?
In England, you have the Georgian style from the 18th century.
Okay.
Symmetry, proportion, restrained ornament. Those elegant townhouses, Palladian windows.
Understated elegance.
Yeah. It reflects the values of order, reason, balance, all those Enlightenment ideas.
The architectural embodiment of the Age of Reason.
Exactly.
Then comes the Victorian era. A complete 180 from that restrained elegance.
The Victorian era, well, it was a time of huge change, industrialization, social upheaval.
And Romanticism.
Yes, and a fascination with the exotic.
A lot going on.
It all comes out in Victorian design, eclecticism, a love of ornament, new technologies and materials.
They embrace it all.
They did, trying to make sense of a changing world.
But even within that Victorian excess, there's a movement towards simplicity, authenticity.
The arts and crafts movement.
Tell me about that.
It began in the late 19th century, a reaction against mass production.
A desire for something more handmade.
Exactly. They championed handcrafted objects, natural materials, simple design.
Record-based.
A return to craftsmanship, celebrating beauty in everyday things.
That idea still resonates today.
It does.
As we enter the 20th century, there's a huge shift with modernism.
A complete break from the past.
What were the driving forces behind that?
Modernism rejected all those ornate, eclectic styles.
A clean slate.
Exactly. Embracing functionality, simplicity, new materials like steel and concrete.
It was a response to a changing world.
A world becoming more urban, industrialized, technology-driven.
What were the key principles of modern design?
Clean lines, geometric forms, open floor plans, no ornamentation.
Sounds very different.
Function over form, efficiency, spaces tailored to modern life.
And some big names emerged during this movement.
Frank Lloyd Wright, Le Corbusier, Mies van der Rohe.
The giants of modern design.
They created some of the most iconic buildings and interiors of the century.
But even within modernism, there were different approaches, right?
Of course. Frank Lloyd Wright, he believed in organic architecture.
Organic architecture.
Buildings in harmony with nature.
Like his falling water house?
Exactly. Built over a waterfall, blending seamlessly with the landscape.
It's incredible.
Le Corbusier, on the other hand, was all about functionalism.
Form follows function.
His buildings often have that stark minimalist aesthetic, lots of concrete.
Very different.
And then there's Mies van der Rohe, famous for less is more.
I've heard that one.
Stripping away anything unnecessary, pure, essential spaces.
His Barcelona pavilion, a masterpiece of minimalist design.
It is. Open space, flowing lines, balance between building and surroundings.
So much variety within modernism.
Absolutely.
What about Art Deco? It seems more glamorous, stylish.
Art Deco from the 1920s and 30s.
Okay.
Geometric forms, luxurious materials, celebrating the machine age.
Those sleek skyscrapers, ziggurat designs, chrome.
It captures the energy of the Roaring '20s.
Modernism with a touch of jazz.
In a dash of Hollywood glamour.
Then there's the international style, even more minimalist.
It emerged in the 1930s.
Okay.
Austere aesthetic, glass and steel, no ornamentation.
Wow.
Buildings that could be built anywhere.
A truly international style.
That is.
Later in the 20th century, there's a reaction against the austerity of modernism.
Right, postmodernism.
Tell me about that.
Postmodernism, 1960s, 70s, challenging the rules of modernism.
Shaking things up again.
Exactly. Playful, eclectic, historical references, humor, irony.
Mixing it all up.
Rejecting the idea of one right way to design.
Celebrating individuality.
Exactly.
And that postmodern sensibility has continued to influence design.
Definitely. We're seeing a blend of styles and influences now.
A melting pot of design ideas.
It's a time of experimentation, drawing inspiration from everywhere.
Anything goes, as long as it's done with intention.
I agree.
What are the big trends in interior design today?
Sustainability is huge.
Makes sense.
As we become more aware of our impact, there's a demand for eco-friendly materials, energy efficiency.
It's not just about aesthetics anymore.
It's about responsibility, too.
What else?
Technology integration.
Our homes are getting smarter.
They are. Smart homes, entertainment centers, home offices, all integrated.
It's like our homes are becoming part of us.
But we also need to make sure our spaces still feel human.
A balance between technology and comfort.
Exactly. That's why personalization is also trending.
Creating spaces that reflect our individual styles.
People want unique, expressive homes.
Moving away from those cookie-cutter designs.
I like that description. And finally, there's a renewed appreciation for craftsmanship, natural materials.
Back to basics.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
The warmth, texture, authenticity of handcrafted things, wood, stone, fibers.
It's like we're coming full circle back to those early human dwellings.
It is fascinating, isn't it?
It's been an incredible journey. From prehistoric huts to modern smart homes, we've seen how interior design reflects our needs, values, aspirations.
It's amazing how much it's changed.
What I find really fascinating is how trends come back around.
They do.
Echoes of ancient Rome and Renaissance palaces, hints of Victorian and contemporary homes.
And now this appreciation for natural materials, handcrafted things, just like our ancestors used.
It's like design is a conversation across time.
I like that.
This deep dive has only scratched the surface, though.
There's so much more to explore.
Keep exploring those periods and styles that interest you. See the possibilities for creating your own spaces.
Your own expressions.
Until next time, happy designing.